Dearly beloved, we gather here today to say goodbye to our much favorited KTM 890 Duke, which has now been replaced by the 990 Duke, and even the 790 Duke, if you want to look at it in those terms. So, goodbye, lovely KTM, and I think this is only a fitting way to send it off by bringing some of your contemporaries to the game. The Triumph Street Triple 765 RS, the MV Agusta Brutale 800RR, and the Ducati Streetfighter V2. So welcome everyone to the KTM 890 Duke send-off, brought to you by Kershaw Knives. As a longtime everyday carry knife of the staff, we're excited to have Kershaw Knives on board as the sponsor for this video. Kershaw Knives creates high-quality, high-performance knives backed by a limited lifetime warranty that users like us are proud to carry. Use discount code 20Motorcycle23 for 20% off at KershawKnives.com, plus free shipping on orders over $50 until December 31st. So yeah, we've brought 4 bikes together, all of which kind of play in the same ballpark of European middleweight naked bikes that can go fast, they look cool, and they can carve up a canyon road or a racetrack like no one's business.
Kind of like a Kershaw knife.
Kind of like a Kershaw knife. Well done, Ryan. But it's all predicated here on the KTM 890 Duke and the fact that it's going away. It's been one of my favorites for a while. Ryan, yours as well. And oh, by the way, viewer, we've got a new tester here, Joe Jackson, to accompany Mr. Tom Roderick, our longtime favorite, now guest tester.
Ooh, long time.
Former staffer of Motorcycle.com. So, yeah, let's just jump right into it. Oh, where do we even begin?
We can begin with, this bike doesn't count. This isn't a naked bike.
Oh, Tom is going to
Sorry.
Tom is going to get controversial right off the bat.
There is too much plastic on his Ducati for it to be a naked bike. Sorry. You can't see a single engine component on this thing. So I just got to throw that out there. It's been bugging me all day.
Okay, now we're going to mute Tom's mic and moving on. Well, Tom, since you're talking, give us a quick snippet about the Triumph, KTM, and MV. Just something quick.
In my mind, I actually mentally broke these down into subcategories. If you want the best play bike out of these 4 motorcycles, KTM Duke is it, period. If you want the best all-arounder, general purpose, do-everything bike, Triumph, bar none. And then the 2, Italian bikes over here, they're kind of in their own spectrum. Expensive, exotic, gorgeous, sound, I mean, everything you expect out of a motorcycle. They just, I don't know if they play in the same field as these other 2. They're just a little bit, separate from, the play bike or the general do-all. You could do that, but, the Ducati has a very racy engine, right? I mean, we all agreed it's like 8,000 and above, comes on strong, really fun. Is it so, usable on the street? Not as much as, either of the 3. So, and then, the MV, it's got its own little foibles over there. Probably the worst seat I've ever sat on in my life. And it's got these...
You called it a cookie cutter seat?
The cookie cutter. It actually tries to shape your butt into the shape of a seat, which is really bizarre. But yeah, you can't do anything with your foot pegs, and it forces your ankles out really wide. And like I said, the seat you could change, right? But the foot pegs you can't.
Let's jump to Joe.
Oh man, so I have to come clean with you guys a little bit. I have a little bit of bias here.
What are you talking about?
I own one of these bikes, and I have owned the previous version of another.
Do tell.
No, he's off camera.
No.
That's it.
Yeah. So I currently own a Streetfighter V2. Though I have to say it's the better color. It's in red, and it has a pretty nice sounding exhaust, which does make a big difference for me emotionally in this test. And then I've had the previous version of the 890. I did have a 790 Duke back in the day, but I bought it from an ex-racer, so it had a full race exhaust, it had Owen's whole 9 yards, so it kind of was made up to be what the 890R has become. And I gotta say, having owned these bikes in different parts of my riding career and skill level, they play to such totally different fields. I mean, Tom, I think you said it great, like the KTM is the best play bike far and away, especially when you get on roads that maybe aren't as nice and have a lot more bumps and you get really twisty with it. This thing really does feel like a supermoto. I mean, I have to consciously find myself putting weight over that front tire because you just have so much fun bouncing that front wheel off the ground, whether you're a big wheelie guy or not. And then emotionally, like I always come back to the V2. I mean, it's interesting. I'm sure later on you guys are going to hear a little bit more about everyone's favorites, but for me, these two are on just set opposite side of the spectrum. With those two bikes, for me, it's kind of easy for the RS and the Brutale to kind of fade into the background, which is not something I thought I was going to be saying about this MV Agusta.
No, I mean, obviously the two triples have that triple character, which is fantastic. I think the Triumph is more of your daily use. It's got some good low to mid-range. The MV definitely wants to be spun up, but like the throttle response with the MV Agusta is, and you know, you can change this. You can change all sorts of stuff in the electronics on all these bikes, but you can change the throttle response, and the engine is at its happy place, you know, when it's really revved out, and Troy can speak to that at the racetrack too, but just the way the power comes on is really intense, but totally manageable, and it makes the Triumph motor feel a little lazy in that regard. And like we were talking about, you know, the Triumph feels slow and cushy, and that's great. And it's great out here with roads that aren't the best. Great motors. I mean, you know, they're so much fun, but the KTM, the punch that you get out of that parallel twin is, you know, far exceeds anything else. I mean, it's got the most torque out of all of these bikes.
Including the bigger engine Ducati.
Right, yeah. And I mean...
And everywhere you want it. I mean,
right.
Down low through the mid-range is just markedly above any bike else.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, it's always there when you need it, you know, around town, canyons, whatever. Whereas the Ducati, I felt myself short shifting that and then realizing, I need to get above 7,000 RPM before I get that big rush of power that it gives off. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to echo sentiment about the 890 Duke. It's just upright, it's super great for commuting. It's fun in the canyons, especially when the roads get tight and crappy. But just being so upright and like being able to look around while you're bouncing around town, it's just super easy to ride. And yeah, I mean, the Ducati's a lot of fun, but kind of like what Tom said, the two Italian bikes are nearly 20 grand, and we're talking like 13 with the other two. So you know, that also farther sets them apart. We were talking about it earlier, the two bikes that have stylemas, the Triumph and the KTM, have a lot different feel at the lever. The KTM is immediate, you get into it's great bite, and you get into a ton of power right away. They both have the same master cylinder too, but the Triumph definitely has softer initial bite. You get good feel once you're in there, and the power's there for sure, but it's just, it maybe comes down to pads, but yeah, very different feel.
Yeah, I mentioned off camera before how my usual one-liner about brakes is I would usually want to change the brake pads if it was my bike. The KTM is probably the first bike in a long time where I've said, you know, I think I'd probably just leave it alone. It's just fine the way it is.
Bouncing back and forth between the MV Agusta and the Street Triple, the MV screams to 14,000 RPM. I mean, that intake noise is so good, and immediately you feel this like awesome connection with the bike. And like what you were talking about, it's such a linear power delivery. It's really exciting. It gets you up there. But when I jumped off the MV and onto the Street Triple, one, it's so quiet, and two, the dash is so hard to read the tack on it. The first two corners I went through, I didn't realize I was banging off the rev limiter in second gear because I just couldn't see it and I couldn't hear it. And this engine, even though it makes almost the exact same power as the MV, it feels slower. It's not, but it feels so much less engaging and exciting.
So since it was mentioned earlier, we did take all four bikes to the racetrack. Chuck Wallet Valley.
Wait, no, not we.
Yeah, but
Brian and I, the collective we, did take these four to Chuck Wallet Valley Raceway with SoCal Track Days. Thanks to them again for hosting us on the day. You know, these aren't necessarily race bikes, but they can clearly do the job. And it's always fun to see what they can do when pushed to the max. We also want to thank Pirelli for sending us the latest Supercorsa SP V4 tires for all four bikes. This is the fourth generation of the popular Supercorsa tire, and the SP version we're using is great on both the street and the track with just a minor change in air pressure. They provided tons of grip and still look great at the end of our test. We'll get right down to it before we break it down into the characteristics. The ranking of lap times, just because it was curious to do that. KTM was fastest, followed by the Street Triple, Ducati, then the MV Agusta. So all four bikes separated by about a second and a half. And you know, I could have gone faster on the Ducati, but I don't think I would have matched the time I did on the 890 Duke. You know, lap times for this kind of a thing is irrelevant in a way, but it also goes to show how closely matched all four of these bikes are when they can get within like a second and a half of each other. Now, to break down the characteristics, the 890 Duke, it's the scalpel for a reason. It loves the racetrack setting. It wants to shred corners. It's rowdy, but it has that same power characteristics these guys talked about having good low-end torque with actually a really good top-end push too, I think is what helped it get the best lap time out of the four. The surprise of the bunch is definitely the Triumph. It was so easy to ride that when I did the lap time and I looked down and saw my lap timer, I was like, holy crap, really? I went that fast? It felt super easy and I felt like I was going slow. The seat is so cushy, the transmission shifts so smoothly, the power comes on so linear. I felt like I was going slow, when in fact I was 4 thousandths slower than the fastest bike here. So it's very much a surprise. The Ducati, my overwhelming memory of that is the weight. Transitions from left to right. It just felt lethargic with the weight I was having to move back and forth. The low-end torque, obviously great for punching out of corners, and then the top-end power being the most powerful here, also a benefit, but the weight I think is what ultimately handicapped it. The MV Agusta. So, I saved that one for last because what a rowdy ride that was. If there was a bike here that was the most exhilarating, by far and away, the MV Agusta.
That's a good thing, right?
That's a good thing, right?
It's good to be exhilarating.
Joe, you mentioned just making the thing scream to 14,000 RPM.
Oh yeah.
Is an absolute treat to your ears. And then when you bang an upshift with the quick shifter at that high of an RPM, and the thing just goes pop, pop, and it just like it sounds so killer. It just inspires you to want to keep going and going and going, and go faster and faster and faster. But then I looked down at my lap timer. I was like, oh, I was going slower than than the Triumph and the KTM, even though I rode my butt off to do it. So, you know, again, this isn't about lap times, but it is a funny number to kind of reference all of these from. And in a way, it kind of transfers back into the street here and how all four of these bikes work together. If I had to pick one bike solely for the racetrack setting, the KTM would be my pick. However, it's worth noting now that the transmission on the 890 Duke, and I think it's localized to this specific bike we're testing, is pretty awful. Yeah. It's pretty darn terrible. Upshifts are very clunky, require a lot of weight under the toe to click it up into gear, and it feels very agricultural. And downshifts with the auto blipper are even worse. I mean, just hard smashing on that shifter to make it go down a gear. So much so that at the racetrack, I eventually just said, screw it, and used the clutch to downshift the gears because it was that bad. Luckily, we have perspective on previous 890 Dukes to go off of, which were much better kept than this one. And those ones were awesome. So to bring things back full circle, what do you say, guys? Is it time to pick what
would you do with your money?
What would you do with your money? Would you run to your dealership and buy any remaining 890 Duke left, or grab one of the other bikes here? So to recap, 890 Duke and Triumph are about $13,000 minus a couple of bucks. And then the two Italian bikes, the MV Agusta and the Ducati, about $20,000. Give or take a few bucks. A $7,000 discrepancy is a pretty big deal.
Big.
So, I'll turn to my right, and Tom, you can go first.
That's a really tough one. Okay, since Troy was saying this is largely a street bike shootout, one thing I'm going to throw out there is, you know, with street bikes, a lot of times you want to take passengers, and 3 of these bikes have passenger accommodations, and 1 does not. So, you know, it looks like there might be a foot peg bracket that you can attach on the left side. The right side, we're not so sure where that pipe is at.
Yeah, I think you can get it on there,
over
but,
the pipe, yeah.
but
Okay.
stock,
Okay.
it does not have it.
Right, so you'd have to buy that. And so, you know, it's just a little bit, you know, of a drawback. for the same amount of money, honestly, the Triumph is going to be, for me, probably the better do anything motorcycle, do everything motorcycle. So if I had to spend my money, I would probably lean that direction.
All right, Joe.
No, he doesn't get to pick.
No. I think I have a fair way to look
Explain
at
yourself.
Yeah, you
Okay.
have a lot of explaining to do.
this. So I think what makes my perspective unique amongst this crowd is ability level. These guys are all pretty advanced riders. I would say at best, I'd call myself an intermediate rider, both on track and street. And I think that gives me a little bit of a shift. What I've been really trying to focus on the last 2 days is ignoring that I already own a V2 and I put a lot of miles on it. Which of these bikes was it easiest for me to hop on and keep up with these guys? And as much as I hate to admit it, there was a very clear answer to that, especially when we were shooting photos. I had no problems keeping up on the 890. And even on my own Streetfighter V2, it was not as easy. When we were doing the close proximity stuff, which is not something I'm used to doing, this was more confidence inspiring, especially at those intermediate speeds. So I think if you are an intermediate rider and you're looking for the easiest bike that's going to give you confidence, it's the KTM. I think the 890 takes the cake for me with the Streetfighter not far behind.
You heard it here first.
Yeah. Ducati likes Ducati. What are you saying?
All right, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason the Triumph and the KTM are parked where they are right now, right? I think we've all kind of picked those two as best value, overall performance, and everything. But it is tough because the MV, I feel the exact same way. I think you said it perfectly. That's exactly how I feel between the Triumph and the MV. The MV is a more exciting experience, whereas the Triumph is super comfortable. The suspension is really well damped. The seat is super cushy. The riding position isn't. It's overall with the rest of these bikes, I think it's more compact rider triangle, but it's not overly so. You're leaned up against the wind just enough to not have a bunch of weight on your wrist or turn into a sail. So it's really comfortable, but it's not as exciting as the MV's triple, And I mean the Ducati's a lot of fun, but it's 20 grand and the KTM's 13 and I work here, so yeah. No, the KTM's a solid package and it's just upright, the bars are wide. I don't know if there's a little bit of a tie-in with the off-road riding that I like to do. It just feels, I feel like I have no problem sliding around on that thing and keeping it in control. So it's gonna have to be me trying to find a deal on an 890 at the dealership if there's any left.
There you go. Well, yeah, like Ryan mentioned, the KTM and the Triumph are parked up front for a reason. But first off, like I mentioned before, that MV Agusta, when you get it into its sweet spot, there probably isn't anything else here that is as exhilarating as the Brutale.
For sure.
But that's only when you get it on a completely smooth road, screaming its head off, like in a very specific area where it's the best bike here. I think if it was a track only decision, KTM all day long. If I could only have one motorcycle out of these four to do everything with, I'm going with the Triumph. We did a KTM 890 Duke and the previous Street Triple before, and I picked the 890 Duke. This updated Street Triple, it's not worlds different from the previous bike. Maybe I'm just in a different place in life now, but again, if I could only pick one bike to do everything, I think I'm gonna go with this Street Triple. I think if I were to put an exhaust on it, make it really sing, that would really sway my opinion towards the Triumph. And with the extra cash I have, even after putting the exhaust on it compared to these other bikes, it would be pretty darn sweet. So yeah, previously I'd picked the KTM with just this little update to the Triumph, and with the fact that I could save some cash and do some nice mods to it and really make it mine, that sounds really exciting to me. So there we go. I'm gonna pick the Triumph.
All right, we've decided
this time around. But you can see how close this was for all of us. KTM and Triumph are really, really good. MV can really excite you if you're that kind of person, and Ducati can too, as proof right here. So, guys, well done. That was a fun
job.
one.
Yeah, enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks
Thanks,
to Tom and Joe for helping Ryan and I out. I know this was really hard to go ride
It's
motorcycles.
tough
know.
when you get an offer like this.
Yeah, but your inputs were valid. So, that's it from us. Tell us what you think about all 4 of these bikes in the comments, because I'm sure you're going to tell us how full of it we are, and we can't wait to read all.
We
the
read them all.
Don't be snarky, Troy.
Comment number 1. So yeah, by the way, this is the video component. There's also a written component that you'll see on Motorcycle.com. We can go into, we'll go into
Yes, you will.
way more details. There's spec charts, there's dyno charts. We'll get more specific on what's inside of all 4 of these bikes, componentry wise and how they work. So go read that supplement at Motorcycle.com as well. And yeah, the good news is whatever you choose will not be bad.
Yeah.
We say it a lot, but really,
Yeah.
all 4 of these bikes are pretty darn good.
It's been fun.
Yeah.
I think we're going to continue to have some fun today.
There we go.
Yeah.
So that's it from us. Go read the written review. Go buy yourself a Kershaw knife. And yeah, as always, thanks for watching. Ride safe, and we'll see you later. Thanks again to Kershaw Knives for making this shootout possible. Hit the link in the description below to find out more.